I'm a proud alumni of Brigham Young University. It didn't start out that way. I initially wanted to go here, but ended up getting a degree here. So, have you ever had a flashback? Like where you have a flashback and all of a sudden a flood of memories come through your brain, and you realize something. Well, I wanted to start off today with a flashback of sorts. It's a little piece I wanted to share with you. It's my book trailer, and it's sort of like a flashback for me, but I think it'll get us started. So that represents a flashback for me. Starts out bad, ends up good. I wanted to start off by reviewing some numbers with you that you may not be aware of. In the United States of America, we have 2 million homeless children. 2 million that we know of. 500,000 of them are fortunate enough to get into foster care. Unfortunately, despite the great work that state and local agencies do and foster families do, foster care isn't always the best place for a young person. On average, they're placed with 4 to 5 families during their time at foster care. Every time they move, they lose a year in school. At a moment's notice, they are told to gather their belongings. Oftentimes, their belongings are in a garbage bag, and they're picked up and put with perfect strangers at a moment's notice. They don't have photo albums or yearbooks. 25,000 of them, about 4%, age out. They turn 18 every year, and the state no longer is responsible for them. About half, a little more than half, 13,000, will never get a GED or high school equivalent. 97% of all jobs require a GED or high school equivalent. 750 of them, about 3%, will get into college. normal kids, about 50% get into college. For foster kids, 3%. 3% of them, or 22, will graduate from college. 3%. 22 out of 2 million. The numbers are pretty staggering for this population. In Davis County, where I live, there's 2,000 homeless children in Davis County, which is much like, Provo, much like here. Out of the 86 schools in Davis County, 81 have students that are enrolled, that are homeless. I'm sure those same numbers echo here in Utah County. I promise you. No one knows it. Every one of them, every one of these kids are worth saving. These children become lost, forgotten. They live in the shadows, so we don't know them. We really don't, because when you're homeless, you keep it a secret. You don't want anybody to know. Well, where do they go? No one really knows. I know where they go. Some wander trying to find their way, lost. Others struggle with the depression and mental illness. Many of them find themselves in prison. Up to 75% of federal penitentiary inmates have served time in foster care or been homeless before their incarceration. More than we think end up dead in the ground. Now, why would I be starting off this speech telling you that? Because I was one of them. The odds are against these kids, and they were against me. But let me share with you what really saved me. We think that hard work, initiative, stick-to-itiveness, that saves people. Well, in my case, it needed to be more. It was the people that saved me, people just like you. So what I'd like to do is I want to start off with a story to give you sort of a background of how I grew up. What I want you to do is I want you to picture Las Vegas, Nevada in August. It's about 117 degrees. Me and my friend Johnny, I'm 9 years old, and me and my friend Johnny are in our front desert. In Vegas, they don't have front yards, they have front deserts. Cactus and scorpions and rattlesnakes come out and get you. They have artificial turf lawns because it's so hot. Well, matter of fact, have you ever heard the expression, it gets so hot you can cook an egg on the sidewalk? Well, in Vegas, it gets so hot you can cook like barbecued chicken and brisket. Have like a block party. It gets really hot there. Well, my friend Johnny and I, we're in our front desert doing what I thought at the time was perfectly normal. We were playing with army men, lighters, and explosive devices. And Johnny had his army men here, up on this ridge, and I'm down here, and we had them all strategically positioned and making noises, and what we did was we took these M80s, which are, sort of like, I think like 4 M80s make up a stick of dynamite. They're pretty big firecrackers, and we elaborately tied all these M80s together in the middle of our battle scene, and we lit the fuse, and there was this boom, this huge explosion. And trying to get out of the way, Johnny fell down, boom, on this dirt heap. Well, it happened to be infested by thousands of fire ants. It was to our great misfortune, And all these ants started climbing up on Johnny and started stinging the crap out of him, and he's like, ah! He's like, it really hurt him. And I was sort of big for my age, and I'm like, what to do? What do I do? So I picked him up like he was my bride, and I went running in the house. I'm like, Mom, Johnny's hurt. There was no one home. My mom was sleeping because she had 3 jobs to provide for our family. I laid him down in the corridor there and screamed, Mom, Johnny's hurt. All of a sudden, boom, my mom's door flings open. "Da-dugga-da-dugga-da-dugga." She comes running. My mom was a big woman, so I use this "da-dugga-da" noise to describe it. She's like, she would love that, by the way, if she was here. But she sees the situation. She sees that Johnny's hurt. She doesn't even think one moment. She goes to the bathroom. She gets a pair of tweezers. She comes out and she starts taking the stingers out of Johnny's skin. She goes to the kitchen. She gets some warm water and baking soda, and she makes a salve, you know, like a little balm. And she goes over and she puts it on Johnny's wounds. Everything sort of calms down for a moment. I look over at Johnny, and his eyes are like that big. And I look over at my mother, and she's completely naked. And Johnny's like, "Your mom's naked." I'm like, "Yeah, so?" She's like, "No, me here, friend in front of mom, she's naked. That's like freaky." And I'm like, "Really? That's weird?" So I'm like 8 or 9 years old when I realized maybe things aren't quite normal in my household. People don't go around naked and swearing all the time. It was sure a surprise for my friend Johnny. You know, he was brutal. Growing up in my household, because I'm good-natured, you know, I say growing up in my household was like living through a whacked-out version of the Brady Bunch on an episode of Cops. It was just really twisted. But truth be told, I was raised in a very abusive home. I was abused in every manner you can imagine, physically, sexually, emotionally. I had a lot of trauma growing up. I was used as a human dartboard, sit on fire, brutally beaten randomly. It was tragic. But it also was a very interesting place to learn. We're all unique, we're all different. We all have different experiences. And my challenge to you is, regardless of your past, whether it was, you know, positive or maybe there's some heartache there, what can you learn from your past? My question to you is, how did your environment growing up impact your life, for the better or for the worse? So, you know, growing up in this environment, I sort of, you know, there was a lot of drug use, and my older siblings were drug addicts and drug users, and I naturally grew up being a dope-smoking hippie kid, you know. Go back one slide, though, Bo. So what I wanted to tell you is that sometimes it shows up in my family in very strange ways. I'm pretty blessed these days. And oftentimes I'll come home from work and I'll be all stressed out, and I have this beautiful home in Kaysville, and recently I just finished this man cave, the ultimate man cave. Isn't it cool? It's a pretty cool man cave, huh, Bo? Bree, you've been there. It's a pretty cool man cave. Well, I'll sit in the man cave and I'll get the remote and I'll start flipping through the channels, watching television, and I'll go through, you know, the news, sports channels. And then occasionally I'll settle on these really weird shows like Cops in Las Vegas or Intervention. Or recently, have you seen the show Hoarders? You know Hoarders? My mother was a hoarder. So I'm sitting here, I'm watching Hoarders, and my wife would be like, Sam, where are you? And I'm like, I'm down here in the cave. She'll come in, she'll see me watching Hoarders. And she's like, what in the world are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm watching Hoarders. She goes, why? That show is so disturbing. Why are you watching Hoarders? I say, well, it just makes me feel so comfortable. It's like old home week, you know? My little brother, you know, he always brags about being on the first episode of Cops in Las Vegas. I think on the television show, he was like DUI kind of guy. And he like brags about it. It just was weird. But anyway, growing up in that environment, I become this sort of dope-smoking hippie kid. Because, you know, 9 years old, my parents used drugs with me, drank with me. You know, I was raised in that kind of environment. And we oftentimes become a reflection of our life's experience. That's what happened to me. No gospel, no theology. It was just all about serving your basic needs. But it was interesting because I got good at two things. Back in the day, I had a lot of nervous energy, a lot of anxiety. So I ran everywhere. I just ran. I'd run to 7-Eleven, run to my friend's house, and I would run. And I think it sort of medicated me. I think it helped me settle. Today, when you have a lot of anxiety, you know, you send your kids to a psychotherapist, and they say, well, you have these chemical imbalances, and we need to get you on some medicine. And you do all this kind of proper stuff. My parents would just say, oh, just beat the crap out of him, he'll be fine. You know, and it had a different philosophy about handling anxiety back in those days. But naturally, because I used to run, it sort of worked it out for me. It gave me this great kind of outlet. And it was weird because I was a big kid, really just big kid, sort of pudgy, but I would run everywhere. So I got good at running. And then I learned about this sport called football. And what I learned about it, very young, was you can physically try to hit someone as hard as you possibly can so their head explodes. Like try to physically maybe try to kill them when you hit them. And you're praised. And like, woohoo, yeah, you're the man. And I'm like, wow, positive reinforcement. And it actually turned out to be a good thing because I think because I played football, it kept me out of like serious activities and gangs and other criminal behavior, you know? And so it became pretty productive. So I'm junior high. I'm in 8th grade at Woodbury Junior High School, one of those invisible kids. But I'm good at track and I'm good at football. So it's the spring of 1976. I'm at Woodbury Junior High, and at the back of the school, east of the schools, there's this dirt track. Still there today. I went and saw it 6 months ago. And I was really proud of my accomplishments on the track team because I was the #1 discus and shot put thrower, and I was also the #1 440 and 880 runner. It was really weird to see a 6'2" 8th grader running 400 meters or 800. It was just really awkward, and then throw the shot put. It just didn't work, you know. But I sort of was proud of it. I didn't do well in school. I was like a DC student, barely passing from grade to grade. I had a 3rd grade reading level in 8th grade. I was in special ed, but I did good in track. And one day after track practice, I remember my older stepbrother, let's call him Lenny. Lenny. You know, he picks me up in this 1976 mustard yellow Gremlin. Now, for you students back there, a Gremlin is like a little compact car. It looks like a squashed egg with wheels on it. And he got this Gremlin because a few months before, he was at his girlfriend's house, and he got this great idea. He said, I'm going to take a steel pipe, and I'll put some rocks in it, put some gunpowder in it, and I'm going to light the fuse and see if the rocks shoot out of the pipe like a rocket, you know. Well, it didn't happen the way he planned, and it blew his hand off. And he lied about it on an insurance claim, got $40,000. $40,000 in a settlement. Now, what do you think Lenny did with that 40 grand? Well, I think I'm going to invest in an entrepreneurial venture. Or maybe sign up with a Better Business Bureau. Maybe I'll save it for college, get my graduate degree here. Some other kind of thing. Actually, he did the first route. He did the entrepreneurial venture stuff, but it was more like illegal trading in drugs, and he amped up his drug dealing quite a bit more. And by the way, Lenny was the guy that used me as a human dartboard, set me on fire. I was terrified of him. And he picked me up from school, and he took me to an abandoned construction site and basically force-fed me all manner of drugs. And I was probably in trouble. I probably should have been hospitalized, but I wasn't. I went home, walked through our living room in our apartment. My parents saw me. They didn't say anything, didn't care. Went to my bed, and I slept for probably 2 days. No one missed me at school. No one cared. Woke up, went to school. After school, I went to track practice and was stretching out a little bit before I was, running, and got warmed up and was running a warm-up lap around that dirt track at Woodbury Junior High. And about halfway through that lap, I felt this crushing pain in my chest, and heaving for breath, I collapsed in the dirt. Heaving for breath, I had this excruciating pain. And as I lay there in the dirt, I had this epiphany, or this grand realization, that if I kept doing what my family was doing, that I was going to be just like them. Not like them. They were miserable. I didn't want to be like them. That day in the dirt, I made a choice to be different. I had no idea how I was going to be different. I just knew inside my heart and soul I could change. I could be different. So I set some lofty goals in place. I decided that moment to go to law school because all the lawyers I knew in Las Vegas had a lot of money. And I like money. Money gives you power. Power gives you everything. At least I thought that when I was 13. And then I wanted to play in the NFL because I love football. So I went to work, started playing football. I started changing things, But what I wanted to share with you is, as I did that, a man came into my life named Brian Cross. He would pick me up from place to place and play catch with me for hours and hours and hours. And Brian was an All-American high school football player from Ohio. Today, he's a prominent coach, a high school coach, a legendary high school coach in Ohio. But at the time, I met him at my great uncle's sports store sweeping floors. He weighed 450 pounds, and he had made some really bad decisions in his life, flunked out of school, and started mentoring me and spending time with me, and would just play catch with me for hours and hours and hours. He would pick me up Wednesday nights, take me to the YMCA. On Sundays, he would play catch with me, and he would go to my football games, and he made all the difference. The big thing that he did for me was he taught me that change begins in your thinking, the way you think. And he taught me how to think differently. He introduced me to this man that lived 2,000 years ago named Jesus Christ. For the first time, he was trying to explain, he was a Christian man, and he'd said that, Sam, I'd made some bad decisions, and I'd gone off the wagon, and I was reaping, he was living a life based on sin, and that he was trying to re-pull it all back together again. And he introduced me to, Jesus. And I'm like growing up in my environment, I'm trying to track. I'm like, well, how does this work? He lived and he died for me, and I'm trying to process around this, and it was such a foreign thing to me, but he really impacted the way I thought. My main point here is that we all have the freedom to choose, and my challenge to you is to take the risk to get outside your comfort zone. I started hanging around smart people. My friends in junior high were dope-smoking hippie kids, because I was a dope-smoking hippie kid. When I decided that I wanted to be different, I lost all my friends. My family, what do you think? They supported me? They ridiculed me, belittled me. They thought I was too good for everybody. I had to take a risk. I had to step outside the comfort zone. My question to you is, what kind of thinking is getting in the way of your dreams and challenges right now? What's blocking you? What kind of thinking is blocking you? I'm lucky because my hard work started paying off. Sorry about my raspy voice, but as I entered into high school, as a freshman, I played on the varsity, the junior varsity, and the varsity football team. My grades went from B's and D's and C's and F's to straight A's. Now I was way behind, so I had to study harder than everybody, but it was a great coping mechanism to stay away from home. I just would study, and I would just do sports. And at the end of my freshman year, we went to state. And I actually got in the football game. I carried the football and got annihilated after a 2-yard gain. I'm like, yeah, take that, We won state. It was a big deal. And I was on my way to start as a sophomore, and I started getting a lot of positive attention. And because I'd resolved and worked hard, everything made out just perfect for me, right? I thought it would. I was on the road, man, making good changes. Well, going into my sophomore year in high school, I come home from school one day, and my mom says, she goes, Sammy, we need to talk. And a year before, our family blew up it's all in my book, you can read it. But she said, we need to talk. I'm like, what's up? She goes, we need to talk. And then I had this cold chill run down my spine. I'm like, ooh, this cannot be good. And she goes, yeah, I'm done. I'm like, what are you talking about? She goes, yeah, I'm done. I'm like, done? My little sister had been made a ward of the state, and was put in my uncle and aunt's house in Idaho. And my little brother was 13, I was 15. She goes, yeah, you guys got to find a place to stay. I'm done. And I'm like, no, you are not bailing on me. And she said, blankety blank I am. I'm done with you. I can't take it anymore. And I was just like completely freaked out. I had no idea what to do. My coping mechanism as a kid was what? Running, remember? So what do you think I did? When she told me that, I got a pair of these army boots that I got at a surplus store, and I went running in the desert for hours, seemed like. This time I was full of energy and in great shape. I didn't collapse because of fatigue, but I ran for hours, and after a couple hours running down this sand dune, I collapsed a second time. This time from pure exhaustion. This time full of despair. How in the world was I going to provide for myself? I was 15 years old. I had no idea what I was going to do. And I looked up to heaven and I uttered my first prayer. And it went something like this. God, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? And I got this really strong impression. Call Brent. I'm like, Brent? Call Brent. Brent was my friend from high school. He had this big red afro, skinny kid. We're all old and fat now, but back then he was really skinny and red afro. He was this Mormon kid. So I go, okay, I'll call Brent. I go and I call Brent. I'm like, hey, dude, Mom just kicked me out. She's going to go live with the Hessians motorcycle gang. There's like 27 people in a 3-bedroom house on the outskirts of Vegas. He goes, yeah, it sucks to be you on that one. Sorry. I'm like, I don't know what to do. He goes, yeah, just pack your stuff and come live with us. He wasn't even living with his parents. He didn't get along with his parents. They lived in Provo. He was living with his aunt and uncle. He goes, just come live with us. I'm like, no, dude, you don't understand. You have no idea. I'm homeless. I have no options. I don't know what I'm going to do. He goes, yeah, you don't understand. Pack your crap and come live with us. So I put everything I owned in this little orange duffel bag. I went to Chaparral High School in Las Vegas, and our colors were black and orange. We looked like pumpkins on Friday nights playing football. Too bad it's not blue, because if it was blue, I could say, hey, Georgia Tech color and BYU color, But I put everything I owned in this duffel bag, and I went and moved in with Brent. Now, on the surface, it sounds tragic. Homeless, 15, don't know what to do. I get to Brent's house, and I notice some things that are completely different. They gather together in the evenings. They partake of food, pleasant conversation. They have prayers. They call it dinner. I'm like, wow, is this what normal looks like? I'm like, they're like, well, how was your day? I'm like, it was fine. How was yours? I'm like, well, I think it was okay. I worked out, studied, and not meeting. And they're like, well, do you have any money? I'm like, no. He goes, I'm 16, 15, 16. Like, would you like to date girls? I'm like, oh, yeah, They're like, well, you need some money. Well, Harvey Langford, who I lived with, he's like, well, I need some work done in the house. I need you to fix the fence and fix the roof. I'll pay you $10 an hour. I'm like, okay. To this day, I think I destroyed their home. I redid the roof, and I'm sure I destroyed it. But he paid me $10 an hour, so I'd have date money. In the back of their storage area, in the back of their house, they had the storage room. He must have had not just 2 years, probably had 6 years supply of food. I would go back there and eat Spam, cheese. I could just eat whatever I wanted. And at dinner, the portions were well, it was so foreign to me, look at all this food. And you don't have to eat in a hurry, and because no one's going to stab you in the hand with a fork if you try to grab the last piece, or, it was totally different. And so when you think about it, on the outskirts of it all, I'm homeless. But the flip side was the blessings of learning what normal looked like. And I actually started taking the missionary lessons in the Langford's home. Through that process, I found purpose and meaning, which is really important when you want to change, to have purpose and meaning. The main point I want to share with you is that it's the struggle that makes us stronger. This is hard to hear. It says easy, does hard. None of us get anywhere in life without struggle, but we don't like it. It's painful, but it blesses us. We have a choice in the midst of the struggle to get better from it or to be bitter because of it. My challenge to you is to be better, not bitter, regardless of what happens to you in your life. My question to you is, what have your trials taught you? Have you learned to leverage them for good? Because there's great good found in opposition and setback. Well, I lived with Brent's family for a while. Took the missionary lessons and bounced from place to place for my last 2 years of high school. But I did all right. Managed to graduate with like a 3.98. I got 1B in high school. I was all state in football, in track, National Honor Society kid, all these kinds of things. And I kept my homelessness a secret because I would just bounce from friends' places to just go to all these different places. I didn't want anybody to know. And I was being heavily recruited to play football by a lot of West Coast schools, including Brigham Young University. And I had taken the missionary lessons. Ironically, my parents wouldn't give me permission to join the church. Like, how freaky is that? Well, I want to make some good decisions. I want to be good, have some rules to live by. No, you can't do it. So I would go to church and as often as I could, and I just tried to manage. But in my senior year, as I was being recruited to play sports, I told everybody I was going to go to BYU because Coach Edwards and Coach Chow were recruiting me, and I was like, I'm going to go here. And at the moment, I was telling everybody else no. And at the moment that where it was real critical time, they really never produced a scholarship. And in the end, I think it was a good thing. When you think about how scholarships work, every year maybe a program has between 15 and 20 scholarships, and they're recruiting 60 kids. And it all works out in the wash, and sometimes kids get offered and they don't get scholarships. Just the way it is. Well, they tell me we don't have a scholarship. I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? So I said, well, I did good in school. I'll just go academically. So I got some academic scholarships. I'll walk on. BYU. So I moved to Provo. I start working. First thing I did was cut my hair. It was the freakiest thing I ever did. I cut because I had long hair. There I had long hair. So I had to cut my hair, and I worked all summer long catching passes from Jim McMahon and Roy Spivey and all these old BYU legends, and I got in incredible shape, and I was lifting hard, working for $3 an hour. I'd go to Reams and I'd get 10 hot dogs for a dime each. That was my lunch every single day. 10 hot dogs because I could get a Coke and 10 hot dogs for $1. And I just worked hard. And I went back to Las Vegas to play in a high school all-star game, and was starting both ways. I was just killing everybody, diving, doing one-handed catches. Back then I was an elite athlete. Today I'm just an old hog offensive lineman guy, but I thought I was going to be an elite athlete at the time. And a week before a high school all-star game, I was in practice, and this kid from Valley High School, our arch rival, dove into my knee, and I heard this loud popping noise, and I fell to the ground, and I looked at my kneecap, and my kneecap was straight up, pointing this way, but my right foot was like flopped over like this. I'm like, ooh, that is not good. And this guy named Dr. Welsh was the doctor there, and he looked at my knee, and he had an athletic trainer named Dave Denham, and they saw my leg, and they said, Sam, we need to fix your knee. And so I got my knee fixed and started to go back to work again. See, my mother taught me two wonderful things. She taught me how to work hard, and she gave me the gift of life. I'll always be grateful for those things. She had a lot of struggles in her life, but she taught me those two wonderful principles. So I went back to work. And the doctor and Dave Denham saw that I was like a maniacal work guy. And they saw me and they're like, Sam, you just work really hard. And I'm like, yeah. And as I was looking at all my options, I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do, so I'll just go to UNLV. You know, they recruited me, and they told me that they wouldn't give me a scholarship, but they'd give me this job working as a Teamster on the Strip. I can make like $35 an hour. I won't have to do anything. I can study. I make like $2,000 a month. That's way more than a scholarship. It's back before the NCAA had, you know, sort of tight constrictions on things. I'm like, hey, I'm going to go to UNLV. So I decided to go to UNLV. Now today, you know, back then UNLV wasn't the academic powerhouse it is today. Back then, UNLV had one accredited major, hotel administration. Now, I apologize for anybody that's UNLV alumni because they're a wonderful school these days, but back then it was like, you know, work in a hotel. That was your option. So my doctor, Andrew Welsh, he was from the South, and he found out about it. And he goes, I heard you're going to go to UNLV. I'm like, yeah. He goes, boy, why are you going to UNLV? I said, well, I weighed my options. I don't have a lot of choices here. I'm sort of going to the best place I know where to go. And he said, son, you always have a choice. I know college coaches all over this country. I want you to do something for me. I want you to get a piece of paper. I want you to write down on that piece of paper all your honors and awards. And we're going to send it out to some coaches that I know. I'm going to send some to Vince Dooley at Georgia, and Rex Dockery at Texas Tech, and Georgia Tech, and Texas A&M. And so we sent out 30 letters with a letter from Dr. Welsh saying that my knee was good and my honors and awards. And to 30 schools. 10 were sort of interested, 20 just sort of flushed me immediately. Notre Dame, who recruited me, said no. USC, bye-bye. You know, Washington, Oregon, bye-bye. 10 showed some interest, but they all flushed me. They all were like, no, sorry, too bad, so sad, you lose, you know. But one day I got this phone call. I answered the phone. It was a miracle I even got the phone call because no one knew where I lived. It's hard to recruit me because I was bouncing, you know. I get this call. Hey, is this Sam Bracken? I said, yes. This is Ken Blair. I'm the defense coordinator at Georgia Tech. We got your packet and we looked at your films. And I was thinking he was going to say, and you suck, bye-bye now, and this is just too bad for you. Sorry I'm using gritty language. I love you all. Please forgive my insensitivity, but it sort of illustrates the point. But I said, yeah. He goes, yeah, we like what we see in those films. We want you to come to Atlanta and look at our campus. I'm like, oh, okay. So I got on a plane, probably the first time in my life, flew to Atlanta, Georgia. First thing I noticed is there's trees everywhere. I'm like, holy cow, there's trees everywhere. And it was rolling hills. You couldn't tell which way was north, south, or it was like freaky. Coach Blair picks me up at the airport, takes me to this place called the Varsity. It's the world's largest fast food restaurant. Per capita, they serve more Coca-Cola, hot dogs, and hamburgers than anywhere else in the world. And he sits down and he barks out this gibberish. I want 2 double niggas, steaks, naked, dog, info, Dr. Coke, and fried, like this. And like, because these people are screaming like, what do you have, what do you have, what do you have? And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on? So all of a sudden there's this red platter, and there's 2 cheeseburgers, 2 chili dogs, there's some onion rings, some french fries, a frosted orange milkshake, and a Coca-Cola. Must have been like 16,000 calories. And he sits it down in front of me. It takes me like 30 minutes, but I eat everything on the plate. Sick to my stomach. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to throw up. But I was trying to be nice. And I spent the next 2 days on campus and looking at Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech at the time was going through a big transition. They were trying to determine whether they were even going to be involved in college athletics. Sort of like MIT. They were going that academic route versus athletic route. And the athletics won. And there was a first-year coach who was the head football coach. His name was Bill Curry. Bill Curry he was a legendary NFL football player. He played for Vince Lombardi and Don Shula. He was a Super Bowl champion, played in 3 Super Bowls. He had 3 Super Bowl rings, and And he was an all-pro, and he was the president of the NFL Players Association, and it was his first year of college coaching. And he took me to his house, and I saw all these Super Bowl rings and these pictures and all these legends. It just freaked me out, you know. And as he sat me down in his house, he said, "Sam, why should I give you a scholarship?" And I said, "Because no kid deserves it more. And I promise you, you'll never regret it." And he's a very dignified man. And he got this smile on his face, and he peered into my soul, and he said, "You know what? That sounds good enough for me. You have a scholarship." And I drove home on the plane, completely mesmerized by my letter of intent, full ride football scholarship to Georgia Tech. It's interesting because what Dr. Welsh and Dave did for me was they helped me see what to change, how to narrow my focus, how to figure out how I could take my skill set and go to the place where God wanted me to go. Earlier that year, I joined the church because I turned 18 and was baptized. But the main point I want to share with you is that a lot of times we can get overwhelmed when things go bad. And as you get overwhelmed, it's hard to see what to change. We can just shut down and lock up oftentimes. But fortunately for me, there were people that guided me and that helped me make movements that was forward. And if we're flexible enough, we may end up in a far better place. I can tell you right now, I'm moving just ahead a little bit. Not that I was supposed to go to BYU, but at a different time. My senior year at Georgia Tech, I gave 500 Book of Mormons to my teammates, my fraternity brothers, my professors, and they all knew I was Mormon because I was like the only Mormon in the whole school. There's like 15,000 students. Like, "What now? What religion are you?" "Oh, you're one of them culty people." I'm like, "No, I'm a Christian man, Mormon dude. This is what I am. Here's what I believe." And I would have never been able to impact the lives of people here at BYU the way I did there, which was much better for me. My question to you is, I want you to ask yourself, what must happen in the next 12 months for you to get closer to your dreams? Oftentimes we'll have wonderful dreams. I work with kids at risk all the time, and they'll say, "I want to be a pediatric orthopedic surgeon." I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome. I want to help you do that. Tell me about your academics." "Well, I quit school in 10th grade. I had a 1.7 average, and I haven't been in school in 2 years. I'm working on my GED. I'm like, "Yeah, that kind of orthopedic pediatric thing, yeah, maybe that's plan A, but you need some plan B and plan C." There's this kind of disconnect between what a realistic goal is and where you actually are. So, but a lot of people don't understand, once you have dreams and goals and that you have to start doing things differently to reach those things. So what's getting in the way of you reaching your goals and your dreams is my question. So I get to Georgia Tech. I pack 3 pair of blue jeans, some underwear, and a t-shirt, some t-shirts into this orange duffel bag, everything I owned. But I also packed it with a key ingredient, my hopes and my dreams. And I moved to Atlanta, Georgia. My first year at Georgia Tech, I make the football team. I'm second string behind an all-conference outside linebacker named Lance Skelton. We play Alabama, Auburn, Tennessee, Georgia. We had the hardest schedule in the country. We play Alabama our first game in front of 90,000 people in Birmingham. They're #1 in the nation. We're the 20 worst teams in the country because we're young. We go to Alabama. Lance Skelton, an all-conference outside linebacker, is ahead of me. First series on defense, I played linebacker as a freshman. First series on defense, he sprains his ankle, comes out of the game. And Coach Blair's like, "Bracken, get in there." I'm like, what? I'm 18 years old. I run out there, and I'm like, "Oh, what am I doing?" I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm making tackles 15, 20 yards downfield. I'm like, "Take that," And they had this thing back then when Coach Paul Bear Bryant was their coach. They ran this thing called the load option. And for you football novices, what that is a bunch of gigantic men coming out and hitting the outside linebacker several times to try to annihilate him. And that would have been my position. And they knew I was a freshman, and they just kept on killing me. Well, I managed to get through the whole game and Near the end of the game, it's really close. We're down by 5 points. Late in the game, we score and we go up by 2. They're on our 1 yard line. They fumble. Lance goes in for one play. He gets the fumble recovery. We go all the way down, score, go up by 2. And they get the ball back with 1:37 seconds to go. They go all the way down to the 20-yard line. 3 seconds on the clock. Kicker lines up. Boom! He kicks it, squibs it, misses it. We win. It's bedlam. It's pandemonium. The 500 fans for Georgia Tech that come down to the stadium, and they come down and storm the field because everything's crimson red. It's a nightmare. And they're like tearing off your tearaway jerseys and all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah. I go to Coach Brown. I'm like, I'm this punk kid. I'm like, yeah, nice to meet you, sir. Go in. I'm getting interviewed. I'm like, I'm just being an idiot. I don't even know what I'm doing. But I've like died and gone to heaven, football heaven. And I'm like, this is good, The next week, we get just annihilated by Florida. They kill us, 32-7. I get knocked down 3 times in one play before the whistle stops. I'm like, but I'm playing, and then we lose to Auburn, then we lose to Florida. Then we lose to Notre Dame, then we lose to Clemson. We go 1-10 my freshman year. And Coach Curry brings me into his office. And he says, Sam, we're so glad you came. I'm like, not half as glad as I am. As a freshman, I was all ACC Rookie of the Year team at linebacker. I was a Dean's List student, and I was starting as a freshman. In the SEC and the ACC, that's sort of a big deal. Coach Curry sits me down, and I'm like, man, I'm so glad I'm here. He says, so are we. He goes, I think you're going to be an All-American, possibly a top 10-round draft pick. If everything goes well and you don't get injured, life will be good for you. So, what do you think happened? 3 months later, it was all good. I'm a household name, right? 3 months later at spring football practice, I get a pair of broken shoulder pads issued to me accidentally. And in spring football practice, as I hit people, I get these stingers in both shoulders where your hand goes numb, a little bit, and you sort of shake it off. I'm getting these stingers. I'm like, why am I getting these stingers? And they say, well, your shoulder pads are broken. So they get the new shoulder pads, but the stingers don't go away. And pretty soon, my shoulders start going out of socket, both of them. And I'm in excruciating pain. Just a few months later, I'm in excruciating pain. My shoulder. Anybody here had their shoulder go out of socket? It's extremely painful. Really bad. Really, really bad, as my son would say. But so I go to the doctor, Fred Allman, our orthopedic surgeon. He goes, yeah, Sam, your career's over. I'm like, no, what? He goes, yeah, your shoulders are permanently damaged. You're done. And at the time, even though I was very young in the gospel, my self-worth was all tied to football. All tied to football. And I said, that can't be. And he said, no, that's what it is. And I said, is there any way for me to play? He said, well, we can do these radical reconstructive surgeries, and you may have a chance to play. How long do you think I took to say, yes, let's get that done? Surgery, yeah. I make this decision to have both my shoulders operated on. I wake up from surgery. There's all these tubes coming out of my shoulders. Blood's everywhere. I'm like throwing up. Whoa! I'm like, what have they done to me? My arm's all wrapped. I'm like, what have they done? Like, I'm just freaked out, in excruciating pain. There's 2 people by my bedside. Bill Curry and Joan Conkey. I haven't told you about Joan. My first Sunday in Atlanta when I was 18 years old, I went to church. It took me 2 hours because they have this transit system in Atlanta called MARTA. And I'm like, how do I get it was the Atlanta First Ward. I'm trying to figure out how to get the Atlanta First Ward. I'm like, it's on Ponce de Leon Avenue. And the people are like, you mean Ponce de Leon Avenue? I'm like, yeah. And so it takes me 2 hours to get there on the bus. I get there. I'm in blue jeans and cowboy boots and a T-shirt. I go in the back of the congregation. And after the meeting, one of the bishopric members comes back and introduces himself to me. He says, Sam, I'm Don Conkey. How you doing? I say, I'm Sam Bracken. I just joined the church, and I'm here in Atlanta, and I'm going to Georgia Tech. I'm playing football. He says, why don't you come home for lunch with us after church? We want to get to know you better. So he brings me home for lunch, and his wife, Joan, was the Relief Society president, and we had breakfast, and Don says, let me drive you back to campus because I don't want you to get lost again. And interestingly enough, before he drops me off, he looks me right in the eye. And he says, Sam, I want you to know that college can be rough, and if you need anything, I'm here. We're here for you. They used to live in this house where they filmed Driving Miss Daisy. It was like a mansion by Emory University on Oxford Road. Beautiful, elegant, stately home. And, he and Joan loved me for no good reason, just because I was there. And Joan didn't want me to wake up from surgery completely, utterly alone. So she was by my bedside. Dr. Allman tells me, Sam, you can't do this for 4 weeks because your shoulder surgery will be ruined. At the end of 4 weeks, you can barely move this, and then you'll start rehab. So at the end of that time, I had this one operated on. For some reason, I think this is going to be different. I wake up from surgery. Oh, I'm throwing up. What did they do to me? Same exact thing. Can't move this arm, barely move this arm. Finally, it hits me. I fall deep into depression. I lose like 25 pounds, 30 pounds. I'm all jaundiced. I get depressed. And my teammates, they know I'm fairly good-natured. And they say, Sam, we know exactly what you need. I'm like, what? Like road trip. I'm like, road trip? Yeah, you need a road trip, which was code for we need a designated driver who doesn't drink as we go to spring break and get wild in Florida. So I let him talk me, and I'm taking Percocet for pain. I let him talk me into being the designated driver to go to Destin, Florida. 13 of us pile into my friend Andy's van. They're doing all sorts of crazy things in the back. We don't need to go into the detail, but they're college football players in the South. And I'm taking Percocet, driving down to Destin, Florida. Should have never been driving. We go to this beautiful resort on the coast of Destin. 2 of the guys go into the front desk. They check in. They didn't tell them that we had 13 guys. College economies of scale kicked in. They get one apartment. They get one hotel room with 2 beds, and we just slept on the floor. We didn't care. We were there for the extracurricular activities with the women, chicas, as Bo would say. So we're out in this beautiful area, coastal resort area, and I'm in this lounge chair over in the dirt off to the side, and there's this beautiful pool. See, that dirt gives you a symbol that another dirt story's coming up. And I look out at the ocean. It's the Gulf Coast. It's aqua blue. It's beautiful. And my friends are like, they're good-looking men. They're all svelte with ripped abs and handsome. And there's all these little wonderful women, fine-looking co-eds everywhere. And they're frolicking around. Woo, played volleyball. Just having a good old time. And I look out at my friends as the day goes on, and they're having a better time and better time. And I'm looking out at the ocean, and I'm in this lounge chair, taking Percocet. And I look at them, look at the ocean, look at them. As the day gets further and further on, I get more and more depressed. And as the tide was flowing out, my sort of hopes and dreams sort of went out with the tide. And I was laying there in this chair. I actually uttered these words: my life sucks, and it can't get possibly worse than it is right now at this very moment. And at that very moment, some birds, seagulls, flew overhead. And yes, they did. They pooped all over me. Bam, right here in the chest. Poop right here in the chest. Boom, poop in the head. Poop got in my eye. Poop everywhere. I'm screaming, ah, ah. My friends, they called themselves friends. Look at Bracken and poop on it. They ridiculed me, made me funny, made fun of me. Well, that moment in the dirt, in the sand, became a pretty big defining moment for me. Remember that first day in the dirt where I was collapsed because of exhaustion, and I got this idea that I could change? Second day in the dirt was full of despair. This time in the dirt, I realized that if I go around being all woe is me, sad is me, I had a hard life, was lit on fire, used as a dartboard, did blah, 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 career debilitating injuries, that the world was going to render me a crapping stick. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to be a victim. I made that decision that day to go back to Georgia Tech and go to work. I'll be finished in about 4 minutes. So I went back to work. That's the only thing I knew. Went back to campus. I started getting up at 5 a.m. and I would run across campus and I'd go to the Olympic pool and swim for an hour like I had special needs because I couldn't barely move my arms, you know. So I'd swim, and then I'd run back across campus, climb the fence at Bobby Dodd Stadium, and I'd run every single stadium stair. It took me an hour and 15 minutes. Then I'd go to breakfast. It was like 8 o'clock. My lazy friends are just getting out of bed, going to dining hall, and I'd go to breakfast, go to class, go to tutoring, because you can't graduate from Georgia Tech without tutoring. If you're a college athlete, it's insanely difficult. And then I'd go to therapy, and then I just rinse and repeated for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And everything changed, right? Wrong. Months later, I can barely bench the bar. The bar weighs 45 pounds. When you play college football, you have to bench more than the bar. When I was 18, I could bench 400 pounds, barely benching the bar. And in great despair and discouragement, I go to Coach Curry. And I'm like, Coach Curry, no one wants, and you know, he's like, Sam, you have your scholarship, everything's good. And I'm like, Coach, it's not good enough. I want to come back. I just don't know how to do it. And fortunately for me, Coach Curry saw more than just a football player. He saw a whole human being. And he said, Sam, I want you to do something for me. I want you to go to the bookstore and I want you to get a 3-ring binder. I want you to put 4 tabs in that binder. I want you to label them mental, physical, emotional, social, and spiritual. And I want you to get that binder and put some paper behind each tab. And I want you to, first thing I want you to do is write down where you're at right now in your life. Take a personal inventory. Where you're at right now. Be honest as you can be. Where you're at mentally, spiritually, emotionally, socially, and where you're at physically. So I did. And he goes, then I want you to turn the page in each tab, and I want you to write down where you want to be. Be as clear as you can. Paint a picture as clear as you can be 12 months from now where you want to be. Then I want you to turn the page in each tab, and I want you to write down a compelling motivation or a reason why you have the goal. And then I want you to turn the page in each tab, and I want you to write down how you're going to do it, your action plan. We used to have, at Georgia Tech, we had this program called the Total Person Program by Dr. Homer Rice, and this was all part of Dr. Rice's program. So I was ignorant. I did exactly what he said. But this little goal book became sort of a special thing for me. I did exactly what he said. I put inspiring pictures in it. I reviewed it. I just, every morning, would spend 15, 20 minutes with it. And an interesting thing happened. 12 months later, everything I wrote in that book actually came to fruition. I actually came back. I earned a starting position. This time my body had changed quite a bit. I was an offensive lineman, 280 pounds. I was like a hog. But I started. I finished my career at Georgia Tech. All conference my last 2 years. I wasn't drafted because I had a variety of injuries. I had I had another shoulder surgery that I had to get through. But when I graduated from Georgia Tech, I graduated with honors from a great institution of learning. I was nominated for the Brian Piccolo Award, which is the Comeback Player of the Year award in the NCAA. I didn't feel too bad. A kid from Clemson with brain cancer got the award. I figured, you know, man, he needed it more than I did. I received some of the highest honors a Georgia Tech student can receive. You know, my main point of this story, which was long, took 10 minutes to get through it, is that hard work always pays off, and that love can be a great motivator. You know, when you work hard and surround yourself with positive, powerful people, there's really no end to what you can achieve. Here's my question to you. In your life, who has believed in you more than you've believed in yourself? Surveys tell us that kids at risk, or anyone for that matter that's in trouble, what gets them out is people that believe in them outside themselves. My second question, that's even more important, is who will you believe in that may not necessarily deserve for you to believe in them? The thing that's a great blessing in my life, it was a handful of people who helped me overcome the barriers that get in the way of change. Through my stories, I've just shared with you what caused great change in my life. as I graduated from Georgia Tech, instead of trying to play in the NFL, which I had an opportunity to do, I went on a mission, and which was an amazing experience for me. After that, I went to graduate school at BYU, and I've had a successful business career. But none of it would have been possible, no matter how hard I worked, without people, without wonderful, powerful people. My mother, she gave me the gift of life and taught me how to work. My last day as an elder in McCall, Idaho, I served to Canada, but I got special permission to go to McCall. I baptized my mother into the church. It was amazing to see her growth. All of us can overcome barriers, whether we're homeless, kids at risk, whether in foster care. We all have the 5 things that get in the way of change. They all get in our way. Brian Cross helped me. He loved me enough to help me think differently and change my thinking. Brent's family loved me enough to help me find meaning and purpose and share the gospel with me. Dr. Walsh and Dave Denham helped me see what to change, to narrow my focus. Bill Curry, besides giving me a chance, taught me that change was a process and that it requires constant course correction. And Don and Joan Conkey loved me for no good reason. Don used to take me on sojourns in the southeast side of Atlanta, all over the place, trying to find members that were baptized and that would never come to church. And he would drag me places, and I honestly think he just did it because I was his protection if he ever got in trouble. But he loved me so much, he earned the right to hold me accountable. I knew that if I didn't go to church on Sunday morning, even though I couldn't hardly walk and my fingers were broken and I couldn't shake people's hand because I was brutally beaten because the day before we just had gone through battle on the football field, I knew if I didn't go, he'd be in my dorm room wanting to know where I was. He was influential in helping me decide to go on a mission instead of playing the NFL. So what's the point? The things that get in the way of change get in the way of change for all of us. What I did in my Orange Duffelbag book is I have these 7 things that get in the way of change that help people change. They help me change, they help other people change. And what I want to do for you today is invite you to change, to grow, to be better, not bitter. I have, if you go to my website, sambracken.com, there's a free offer. There's these 9 or 10 coaching videos you can sign up for, and they just sort of walk you through a change process that's found in this little workbook called My Roadmap, which goes with my Orange Duffelbag book. But anyway, it's been great to be with you, to spend time with you. I love Brigham Young University, and it's been an honor to spend time with you. Thank you.